Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. For those of you who couldn't join us for our first webinar, I'm Andrew Hunsberger, Program Manager for AI Connect 2 in the Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy at the U.S. Department of State. Given we have several new AI Connect members joining us today, I'll provide a truncated overview of the program. And for those of you who have heard this before, my apologies and thank you for your patience. To our newcomers, on behalf of the department, I would like to welcome you to AI Connect 2. My colleagues and I, as well as our partners at the Atlantic Council Geotech Center, are very excited to begin this process with you over the next year. So as way of background, AI Connect got started in 2021 with the recognition that the rapid expansion of capabilities and uses of artificial intelligence bring enormous opportunities for economies and societies, but also carry risks if AI technologies are used irresponsibly or for malicious purposes. In order to ensure we can collectively reap the benefits of these technologies and develop responsible AI policies and strategies, it is critical that global conversations on AI have a broad array of perspectives that are not confined to a handful of countries. The AI Connect program addresses this need by empowering underrepresented stakeholders and increasing the participation of global partners in multilateral AI policy discussions and forums. It also promotes the implementation of AI strategies, policies, laws, and regulations that are aligned with global norms and OECD AI principles. Building on the momentum of AI Connect 1, AI Connect 2 will support and coordinate your participation, totaling 150 nominees from over 60 countries, convening both in-person and virtual workshops and webinars on the development and applications of responsible AI. Over the next year, the program will host 4 major regional workshops in South and Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Eastern Europe, and Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as 13 global webinars and a series of AI Connect network newsletters. You will have the opportunity to hear from international experts on a range of topics related to AI policy and development, where you will be able to share best practices and lessons learned with other members of the AI Connect program. And you will also be provided resources for identifying tangible steps towards enacting responsible AI policy with the support of the AI Connect network. The program will conclude in early 2025 with an in-person delegation of program participants to the United States, where select nominees will engage directly with subject matter experts from U.S. government agencies, academic institutions, think tanks, and the private sector to discuss responsible AI policies. As the global conversation on responsible AI is rapidly expanding, it's critical that conversation has a broad array of perspectives. We are looking forward to seeing you join the program and expand our network of practitioners that advocate for and advance OECD policies on AI development and governance. I'd like to say thank you once again to the Atlantic Council for their partnership on this program and its successful continuation. And now let me pass it back to Tricia Ray to introduce our next speaker. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Welcome again to the second webinar, and the first of which where we'll be really delving into what we mean when we say responsible AI. In the first webinar, Daniel Remler from the Office of the U.S. Special Envoy for Critical and Emerging Technologies touched upon all the processes that he's tracking in his role as an AI policy coordinator. And today we'll be delving into what some of these processes look like and mean from the insiders, so to say. And so we are joined today by Karine Perset, who is the head of the AI unit in the Digital Economy Policy Division, the Directorate on Science, Technology, and Innovation of the OECD. We're also joined by Yoichi Iida, the Deputy Director General for G7 and G20 relations at the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications of Japan, and Justin Fair, the Director for Multilateral Affairs at the Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy. With that, without further ado, I'll be turning to each of you to just walk us through your day-to-day in your respective roles. What moving pieces are you tracking? Which stakeholder groups are you engaging? We can turn first to you, Karine.
Thanks a lot, Tricia. I actually have a few slides, if that's helpful to show, which my colleague Nicholas is kindly sharing because my technology capacity is limited with Zoom. But I wanted to first thank you and the State Department and the Atlantic Council for inviting the OECD to present again in this context. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all those on the call. like Mark, we're big fans of this program, which, among many other things, has allowed many countries like India and others to participate in the work we're doing at the OECD and the Working Party on AI governance more specifically. So my name, as you said, is Karine Perset. So I'm in charge of the AI unit of the digital policy division of the OECD. And Yoichi chairs our overall digital, but he'll get into that after all, the overall digital work. And so what I thought might be interesting is to start with a quick introduction for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with what is the OECD, and just introduce that this is an intergovernmental organization with 38 members today. Those members are market economies and democracies. So those are the two conditions for membership. And they share values in common, and we have 4 advisory committees, which include the technical community, the business community, civil society, and trade unions. So those are part and parcel of all involved in all the work we do. And we also have many partner countries and partner institutions, particularly other intergovernmental organizations, and the partner countries, vary very much depending on the topic at hand. So and their level of engagement and varies also. So in our working party, we tend to have a lot of non-member participation, just because the topic is of interest to them, and also because of outreach efforts. But overall, the mission of the organization is to help build consensus on policy practices for better lives, common frameworks, and principles. So it's really kind of an upstream policymaking body, and basically a hub where that covers what's, I think, different about the OECD is it covers all areas of policy under a small roof, which is just one institution with not that many people, because we're focused on upstream policymaking and all areas of policy except for defense. And the other differentiator is really that the policy development processes are very much based on evidence. They're and on multidisciplinary cooperation. So we'll gather data, evidence, and lessons learned. There's a lot of statistical work that we do in particular, and shape international policy standards to improve all citizens' lives. And here you can see on the slide some sample agreements where I guess I just take the recent global minimum corporate tax of 15%, which most of the tax authorities around the world agreed to, but was overdue, but was a difficult political agreement to reach. So moving on to AI, the OECD AI Principles of May 2019 were the first, they're the basis for most of our work. They were proposed by Japan all the way back in 2016 in the G7 context, and they were the first intergovernmental standard on AI, and are also the basis for the G20 AI Principles, which are the exact same principles. And so they're the first 5 of these principles are value-based principles that relate to the ethical and safety questions for AI to be trustworthy and human-centric. And these apply to all actors, so private sector, public sector, academia, and so on. And the 5 other principles lay out key actions that policymakers, so governments, need to implement in order to foster an AI ecosystem that can thrive on the long term and benefit societies. So over the past year or so, actually a little bit more than that, 2.5 years, we've been working on revising the AI principles to keep up with technological developments and emerging policy priorities. First, last year, by revising the definition of what is an AI system. And currently we're in the process of updating the recommendation itself with, again, these are fairly minor recommendations, but just to keep, just to reflect sort of new issues or that have arisen, for example, that Mark alluded to with the safety summit and potential unintended or intended malicious use of AI systems and control of AI systems, as well as generative AI and some of the new issues pertaining to mis and disinformation and things like that. And I'm happy to say that we've been able to make this progress thanks to our chairman of the working party, Yoichi Iida, who's also on this call. So I just a call out to him. So these principles have been adopted by again 38 OECD member countries, 8 non-members, and the G20, and we have a lot of expressions of interest now from all regions of the world, interestingly, on new countries that wish to adhere, particularly from Africa, and Latin America, which is interesting, and we're delighted. It's fantastic news. So since the principles were adopted, we've been focusing on kind of 2 big initiatives to help countries implement them, and they relate very closely, I think, to what Mark has also introduced in his remarks. First is the OECD.ai Policy Observatory. So that's basically a website which provides a lot of data and resources to monitor implementation, and help countries, understand different facets of different topics, and realize. And the second sort of big bucket of work is, of course, the work of the OECD Working Party on AI, and it's 6 that's a working party of the Digital Policy Committee, that Iida-san will mention in a moment, and it has currently 6.5, and soon to be 9 expert groups, which focus on specific topics that need attention and bring together. And these are multi-stakeholder groups, so these are depending on the groups, they'll have more AI researchers or more academics or more policymakers or in the on the privacy work, data protection authorities, so depending on the topics, they'll bring together the stakeholders that are the most relevant to the discussion. Just to maybe provide a little preview of some of this work, the first group is looking at risk and accountability, and here as developing really important work such as the Responsible Business Conduct Guidelines for AI, which is a sort of a certify the certifiers mechanisms to make sure that principles are respected along the AI value chain, so to speak. The second one looks at AI incidents and hazards, and here and Mark's very involved and actually co-chairs this group. And the goal here of this group is to come up with a common reporting framework so that AI incidents are reported in much the same way in all countries. And this is to preempt experiences that we've had in other policy areas where each jurisdiction comes up with its own framework, which we then can't compare. So we can't track trends globally. So it takes time to then harmonize them. The third group looks at compute capacity of different countries and the impact of compute on the environment. So that's also becoming really an important topic in the AI discussions. Another group on AI futures conducts foresight exercises, and that's the group that really brings together top researchers in AI labs around the world, and sort of to give governments kind of that anticipatory view of what's coming, so they're not taken by surprise like they are in some areas. Focusing on the medium and long term. The fifth is developing an AI index that's really focused on sort of where countries where different countries which have different economic structures can benefit most from AI. So it's a little different from other AI indexes. I mean, it's very different. It's got that specificity. And finally, the group on AI, data and privacy brings together the AI and data protection authorities and kind of trying, which are really from two different worlds, with on the one hand, data minimization, purpose specification, and so on. And on the other hand, the AI community, which is not about data minimization, on the contrary, in some cases, but which acknowledges and knows that data privacy is extremely important. So that's just an example of some of the work under the Working Party on AI Governance. I think I need to go a little faster, so I'll just go quickly just to describe a couple of resources. There are many on the OECD.ai Policy Observatory. We have quite a large database of national AI policies, which we track for now in 71 jurisdictions, which is growing up to 90 now, with a lot of engagement from the African Union Commission and African countries, as well as some other countries in Southeast Asia. And so this database is is interesting because it's a way of keeping track of what's happening and what's working where. And so I won't say much more, but then another, so this is just an example of, a country, a dashboard where for Mauritius, which provides different data information on what's happening in Mauritius and the AI field. And then maybe just to mention that we're collecting a lot of data and trends which allow us to see AI developments from different perspectives, from different viewpoints. So, and what our goal here is not to replace, of course, official surveys that governments and that national statistical offices do, but really to add to that sort of more real-time, timely information on sort of, skills development, skills capacity, venture capital investment, jobs and skills, software development, search trends, and education demographics, all of that. Again, all pertaining to AI. So this is important because things are moving so fast that like the skills that were in demand 3 years ago or 2 years ago are not necessarily relevant today. And so the education ministries don't necessarily need to know, what are the job postings today asking for in terms of AI skills, and things like prompt engineers were not even on the radar 2 years ago. So that's where the real-time or quasi-real-time nature comes in. So with that, I think I'll just thank you for the attention, and so apologies for going a little over. Here are a few resources that might be of interest to you on that slide. Or we can share those after.
Great, thank you so much, Karine. With that, I'll turn to Yoichi-san. The same question to you. Could you walk us through your day-to-day, also as you're looking in light of your role as managing the engagement for Japan for both the G7 and the G20? How do you see Japan's engagement with these two groups and the value that you derive from each?
Okay, thank you very much, Tricia, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. My name is Yoichi Iida. Actually, I'm serving as Assistant Vice Minister at our Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications of the Japanese government. I'm also serving as chair of the Digital Policy Committee at OECD, as Karine kindly mentioned. And I very much thank to U.S. Department of State and also Atlantic Council for your kind invitation, and also thank Mark for your kind remarks in his presentation. So as mentioned by Karine in her presentation, Japan actually took the role of making the proposal probably as one of the very first proposals to start international discussion on AI governance when we took the presidency of G7 in the previous round in the year 2016. And luckily, I was chairing the working group at the time to talk about many other policy affairs in ICT policymaking field, including AI. But interestingly, at that time, when we proposed to let's talk about AI policy, AI governance, the ICT policy people were not very much what is active, or they were a little bit reluctant because at the time AI was a kind of regarded as kind of standalone technology, computer technology rather than ICT technology or technology over the network. But what we believed was AI will be connected to each other, work interactively over the network. So this should be discussed by ICT people, and also this should be discussed in multi-stakeholder approach, because as same with other cases in digital policymaking field, AI policymaking should be discussed and joined and also implemented by all different stakeholders, including business, tech, and academia and civil society. So what we proposed was to start international discussion in multi-stakeholder way, and the G7 members were a little bit reluctantly but agreed. But we wanted to continue the discussion with robust expertise, and that was why we proposed the same proposal to OECD, and that was the beginning of the work at OECD. So we were very lucky. We saw the achievement by OECD as AI principles in the year 2019, and in the same year, we were luckily in the position of G20 presidency, so we made use of the same achievement from OECD when we discussed AI principles in G20. So that was why the G20 AI principles was also agreed in the same year. And the discussion at G7 was also continued, and we saw the discussion led to the launch of global partnership on AI in the year 2020. And it was first initiated by G7 members led by France and Canada, but joined by other members such as India and others. And now GPA has 28 countries or even more with EU as one of the official members. And GPA is focused on practical implementation of OECD AI principles. So every time we discuss international AI governance, we have a very robust basis of OECD principles. I joined a discussion at UNESCO. I joined a little bit, but joined the discussion at Council of Europe on AI convention. Every time we saw, we have a very common and robust foundation for discussion, which is OECD AI principles. And we are very happy to see this AI principles is being reviewed and will be agreed with some updates in the coming Ministerial Council in May. And last year, as many of you are aware, Japan took the G7 presidency, and we discussed AI, global AI governance once again. In the beginning, what I wanted to discuss was as all of you recognize, the different jurisdictions, different governments are heading in a little bit different directions. EU was discussing AI Act, which is including legally binding instrument, while US and Japan were still pursuing what we call soft law approach without legally binding element, at least at the time. And we didn't want to see, the different jurisdictions are spreading out and losing the integration, losing the coherence, and falling into the fragmentation of governance. So we propose to discuss once again the global AI governance among G7 members, and we agreed to increase make our efforts to increase the interoperability between different AI governance frameworks. Even during the discussion, we had very good input from Karine herself and also other colleagues from Atlantic Council and others. And we are very grateful for a lot of input into our discussion. While discussing the AI governance in general, we saw a rapid rise of generative AI, and G7 ministers recognized we cannot conclude our discussion without discussing generative AI. So they decided to continue the discussion, and leaders, national leaders, named the minister's effort with Hiroshima AI process. That was the beginning of the initiative, and we continued the effort until the end of the year. And we agreed on Hiroshima process, guiding principles, and the code of conduct. During our efforts, we had a lot of input from US government voluntary commitment and other AI governance initiatives, including Bletchley Safety Summit. And we are very grateful that we could reach one conclusion, which is not perfect, I believe, but as many people kindly admire, it was still done in a very quick, agile way. And that was only made because we had OECD's AI principle as a basis, a common basis for our discussion. So this year, Japanese government is taking the chair of Ministerial Council at OECD in early May, and we are trying to integrate, those different achievements, in particular the updated OECD AI principles and the Hiroshima process together into the one integral framework. And we are also trying to reach out to the government and other stakeholders beyond the G7, beyond. First, we are talking with OECD member countries, but we are also contacting with the government and other stakeholders, especially business people beyond OECD, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America. So we are strongly committed to continuing and expanding our work, our effort with all the relevant people in global AI ecosystem. So that is what we want to do together with all relevant people, and we are very much grateful for such opportunity to share our work and strengthen the joint effort. So thank you very much, and look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you so much, Yoichi-san. 3 important points came out from your remarks. 1, the need to be agile. The second, the need to be inclusive. And then the need to continue speaking with partners. And as we can see from the chat, especially with Karine's ongoing conversation with a lot of the participants, there's already plenty of new partners and ways to connect that we're seeing coming out of this discussion. With that, I'll turn to Justin, especially as you look out into like this alphabet soup of AI principles, processes. The OECD principles have come up in discussion, but also the UNESCO recommendation on AI ethics, G7, G20, the Global Digital Compact. What do you see as the value proposition of each of these processes?
Yeah, and good morning, and thank you, everyone. And I appreciate the Atlantic Council organizing this, and also for the panelists. I think it's a good coalition with OECD, and we just had a team return from Paris for some of the spring meetings there. And then, of course, Yoichi-san, who some of us wonder when he ever finds time to sleep because he's just always working so hard. But very much appreciate the conversation. Yeah, when we talk about AI and my focus is mostly within the multilateral system and a lot of the multilateral discussions that are happening around AI. It's certainly not cliche to say it's just everywhere. Sometimes we joke that it's like the movie, it's everything, everywhere, all at once, or at least seems that way. And it really is just dominating the international conversation right now. It's important to note within that it isn't a wholly new conversation. There's been a lot of work that preceded international attention shifting to AI after ChatGPT and some came out. Of course, OECD developed principles way back in 2019, which is now 5 years ago. Work in UNESCO on the ethics of AI. There was the first resolution in the International Telecommunication Union on AI in 2022. So there's been a lot of work. I think even the most recent ITU report, which I believe is only through 2022, noted about 40 UN agencies, just UN agencies, working on AI. So there's a lot of work to build on, and that's important to note. At the same time, clearly the number and the speed of these processes are accelerating. Mark highlighted this a little bit, but just in the last year, a lot of us were working on some things last July, where in Geneva, there was the largest AI for Good meeting ever. The Human Rights Council reached consensus on a resolution on emerging texts that incorporated AI and implications on human rights into that resolution that was adopted by consensus. The IGF really focused a lot of last year's meeting on AI. In New York, the UK organized a Security Council briefing on AI. The US released the voluntary commitments. And at the end of July, as we were going into summer break, was like, that was a very busy month on AI. That was a uniquely busy month. But then the fall was even busier. The UN announced the high-level advisory body on AI. The UNGA high-level week last year seemed to have a much more focus on tech issues, including AI. The United States, with us, our Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, organized an event on how AI can help accelerate progress towards the SDGs. US released the EO on the executive order on AI. There was Bletchley Park. And then, of course, with our colleagues in Japan, the G7 leaders released the code of conduct. And then also the IGF in Kyoto just really seemed to be a major event on AI with a lot of stakeholders coming together there. So then at the end of last year, we really joked that last year was a uniquely busy year on AI. And already this year, it seems to be accelerating even more. The U.S. re-engaged in UNESCO and attended the second global forum on the ethics of AI in Slovenia. The OECD just continues to update the principles. There's conversations in GPI and G20 and G7 how to take this work forward. And then most recently, the United States led this effort in New York to develop a UN General Assembly resolution on seizing the opportunities for safe, secure, and trustworthy AI systems for sustainable development. And certainly appreciate the support from partners, including Japan, who was in at the beginning of that, and then also international organizations like OECD. So it seems to be a busy start to the year, but even now, I think we realize that this conversation is still accelerating. As we move into the spring and then into the fall, a lot of focus around issues like the Global Digital Compact, the recommendations from the UN's High-Level Advisory Board on AI, going towards the Summit of the Future and some of these other events. So you asked about the value proposition. I think that they all have different stakeholders, dynamics, focuses, and that's entirely appropriate. There is not going to be one ring to rule them all when it comes to AI. It is going to take a collective effort of a lot of different experts, a lot of different organizations, a lot of different stakeholders coming together and really building on their strengths, their mandates, their competencies to create an ecosystem that ensures that AI is safe, secure, and trustworthy. There are principles that can help support that. I think has already been said, inclusive, transparent, multi-stakeholder. We really need to ensure that the systems are human rights based and efficient, effective, and that we've really built the trust within the whole system so that there's buy-in from the people developing the technologies, the people using the technologies, and that ultimately the system has the buy-in and is effective. I'll pause there and then turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justin. We now do have some time for questions from the audience. So if you have questions, please drop them in the chat and I'll come to you to ask that question. And while you all think of your questions, one question to all of you, and especially seeing as so many people are interested in engaging in these processes in the chat, what avenues are available for individuals, for organizations to contribute to your respective efforts at a national or international level? We can start with Karine.
Sorry, I was just unmuting. Well, there are multiple avenues. I mean, and again, they can be divided, I guess, into two buckets. One is contributing to the OECD.ai Policy Observatory, where we have a very active sort of blog, which we call the AI Wonk, which really kind of tries to bring different perspectives on developments in AI around the world that are relevant today, and that's open to anybody to contribute to if they're interested. We also have as mentioned and in the chat, we have these national national country dashboards, which we're looking to grow in partnership with the UN, with the OSET, the Office of the Tech Envoy at the United Nations, and so that is also very, very important, because that's kind of it's a difficult work, and it's hard to keep track, but it's one of those databases that it's really difficult to keep up to date, and so you don't want to have several, because keeping several up to date is a drain on resources from countries, because they'd have to keep them updated in several spots. So that's why we're cooperating with the European Commission, with the United Nations, and others on this database, so that we have one, and we're also building smart tools to make it easy, based on language models, in fact, but avoiding hallucinations, although they do come up with good policies, sometimes, at least credible ones. But to summarize, sort of, if, let's say, you're an education ministry, you're interested in knowing, well, what have other countries similar to my country tried out, and what has been successful, and where have they, been able to grow the skills penetration in their countries. You can get a summarization of all the policies, and then links to the relevant national documentations, which is very difficult to do otherwise, because there's, it's the whole world, of course, and it's many ministries, and it's many different parts of government in each country. On the other side of the bucket of we have sort of a working party on AI governance, which is broadening its membership. And we also have, as I said, these expert groups. So for now we have 6, and we have 3 more being created that are focusing on specific thematic areas like AI in health, AI in education, AI in the public sector. And so depending on your interest, those are informal expert groups that, again, depending on the topic, will bring together the experts in particular areas. We also foresee that, our colleagues in the Development Cooperation Directorate and the Development Center at the OECD have also indicated a lot of interest in AI in development. Now, there's also a lot of other being discussions in plenty of venues, but those are some of the ways that to engage with the OECD. So there are quite a few, again, depending on the interests and the angle you're coming from and what you're trying to achieve.
Thank you so much, Karine. There's a question in the chat for Yoichi-san. Can you please share insights on the Hiroshima AI process and how group membership could be beneficial for small island developing states where the technology, the state of development is still in its infancy? This question is from a participant from Fiji.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think, in every country, every society need to benefit from AI technology, and everybody has the different ways to make use of the technology. Because every society, every culture, every jurisdiction has different conditions. So there should be some chances, and of course, the ways for or even small island countries to benefit from the technology. And if you compare the Japanese AI companies with big US big techs, Japanese companies are also in infancy. So we want to not only raise such industry from our industrial perspective, but also help our citizens and users to benefit from the technology, which is not always necessarily from our domestic providers, but we can benefit from foreign AI companies. But we need some guardrails and guidance, or sometimes regulations to protect our citizens and the users, or even the industry. And we need to share what other countries are doing, what other people are doing, and we can, of course, import what we need from other countries. But sometimes we have to admit the differences. So it is, I believe it is very useful to share the international common understanding and follow as much as possible. But sometimes we need to understand where we put some different guardrails or different regulations in our own countries. So joining the group, sharing the knowledge, and discussing the differences, and probably sharing the commonalities would be very much helpful for everyone, not depending on the size of the countries or level of the development. And that would help the global AI ecosystem grow in a consistent way, and find even the different regulatory frameworks interoperable and consistent with each other. So this is my personal perspective, and I hope we can work together, recognizing the differences. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yoichi-san. There's a question for Justin in the chat. what are the most important components and activities to consider when developing AI guidelines? And perhaps a related question from our participant from Kazakhstan, do we need separate regulations for AI technologies?
Thanks. Yeah, just on the first question, I think that when we talk about the principles or the processes or our approaches, on the one hand, there is going to be a lot of different processes. That's natural and that's inevitable. And we should welcome that, ensure that they're working together, that they're interoperable, that there's complementary, but also that processes adhere to certain kind of values in and of themselves. They should be transparent. There should be some expert basis for them. And they should also include the meaningful participation of non-government stakeholders. All those things are going to make the outcome stronger. So even as we think about the processes themselves, we should have those values. Within the UNGA resolution on artificial intelligence, there were things we tried to prioritize in that, and I think it is reflective of things that we try to prioritize across the board. This is closing those digital divides, including the AI divide, promoting equitable access to the benefits of AI, respecting, protecting, and promoting human rights and fundamental freedoms throughout the life cycle of an AI system. Again, this multi-stakeholder approach. And then we also need to work to protect individuals from all forms of discrimination, bias, misuse, and other harms from the AI, while safeguarding privacy and protection of personal data. And then also, again, there is an aspect of encouraging the private sector to adhere to the applicable international and domestic laws. So those are a lot of things we've prioritized in that, and I think that is things that we'll continue to build on through other process. If some of the question is, well, where are these issues going to come up? I think certainly there's going to be continued work in the G7, building on the work that was done under the Japanese presidency last year. Certainly the work at OECD is incredibly valuable, and there's a lot happening there. And then this is the year, I think, where some of the conversation does shift into the UN, and there's going to be a focus clearly there's going to be a focus within the UN system on this. That started somewhat with the UNGA resolution on AI. It will continue in the Global Digital Compact discussions, and in some ways, the recommendations from the high-level advisory body on AI will fit into that. A lot of that's TBD as the year kind of unfolds, but clearly that conversation is going to play out, and it's very important. But I would also encourage folks to continue to look at a lot of the multi-stakeholder dialogues that are going. The IGF continues to be a very important international forum for these conversations, but also national and regional IGFs that have promulgated around the world provide, sometimes a more local, a more regional conversation than some of these global discussions that are happening, and it can help folks get into issues that are more locally relevant. Thanks.
Thank you, Justin. Karine, there are a couple of questions about resolving disagreements among countries. I'm sure you've encountered some of these in your role. What are some of these issues in AI governance that consistently crop up as a point of disagreement, and how do you then go about building consensus around those?
I would not call them disagreements per se, so we'll not have total opposites. We'll have shades of gray, and we'll have, for example, more or less, more self-regulation versus more binding regulation, that type of again, shades of gray, which is absolutely not specific to AI policy, which is true between countries in all areas of policy, and with countries with different traditions, different structures, and so on. And so it's more again about those shades, those shades of gray, and coming towards more balanced, where do we, because at the end of the day, how we achieve our policy objectives, there are many different ways of doing that, and but agreeing on those policy objectives is what we try to do. And then how to do that, again, is country specific. And also where the red lines are set is also going to differ because of cultural norms and so on. So the red lines are always going to differ, and the precise implementation mechanisms are always going to differ. But you know, what are we trying to do overall, and how, you know, and who needs to do what, that's what we try to build consensus on, and that's actually fairly easy. And I mean, we just in the course of this conversation, I mean, if we look back a few years ago, you know, a risk-based approach to AI applications was not obvious, right? And now it seems obvious, and it's a consensus, as far as I can tell, by every country who's developing AI policies. It depends on the risks that it posed and the benefits. So it's a risk-based approach, and we're all converging very much. And you can see, for example, in the OECD AI Principles from 2019, but you can see even in its predecessors, which were more on the academic side. But you can see in the agreements that came afterwards that they're very much the same thing. They're completely aligned. There's you know, maybe a little bit more emphasis on X or Y, but essentially they're saying the same thing. So everyone is trying to go in the same direction, in this direction of widely shared benefits, of mitigating harms, or ceasing harms where they're not acceptable, or, you know, preventing them. And so, you know, I think that's very positive. I think also another important topic that has been growing, is really this. I mean, one of the issues that's a difficult one to crack, really, is the widening inequalities brought by artificial intelligence, and that's been happening from the early days that were, you know, and maybe it's happening more slowly than we thought it would happen, but nonetheless we can see widening inequalities within countries and between countries, and how to fix that and how to make sure that we can control that is, for me, I think a top priority. The other top priority, which is not part of the OECD's mandate, so it's not for me to solve, is really pertaining to the use of AI in military contexts. But again, that is for others to solve. But it is a huge, I think, a very, very important one.
Yes, thank you so much, Karine. All right. There is one question. Apologies, I missed it. Was right in the beginning. The question is, how often should a piece of regulation around AI be reviewed? Especially, as Yoichi-san mentioned earlier, the rapid uptake of generative AI had added another dimension to ongoing international processes around AI. So how often should they be updated? We can turn first to Yoichi-san for his thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that is a very difficult question, and hardly can be answered. But as everybody sees, the technological development is so quick and huge. So I believe we need to continuously update and review the regulation, and that is the reason we need to be agile and flexible, and we always need to pay our attention to the what to say, the inclusiveness. So I cannot predict, you know, how often, but I can say, you know, continuously, probably regularly, and probably forever. Somebody talked about the regulation fatigue in the chat box. Yeah, regulators maybe but at the same time, industry and users may also feel the fatigues. So voluntary and flexible way would be very important.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for your insights there, regularly and continuously. That's, I think all of you will have a lot of work continuing in the next few years as well. All right. Another question in the chat. A critical point linked to AI lies in its impact on ethics and society. And this kind of links back to something Karine was saying earlier, in that most countries agree on the outcomes they would like. It's just certain issues that need to be ironed out in the process to get there. One of the fears is that AI will undermine our values, our basic rights, norms, behaviors. What are the best approaches our countries can take to deal with this situation? Justin, I could turn to you, because with the US, there's been like that iterative process, starting with the AI Bill of Rights. So there's been this consideration of broader societal implications and then narrowing down into specific deliverables. Would you have any insights on that question?
Sure. Yeah, I think as I mentioned, I mean, there's a risk from for individuals from AI, and I think you alluded to this, Tricia, exacerbating, but even increasing forms of discrimination, bias, misuse, or other harms. And that's a real challenge, and that can really undermine societies and do real damage. And I think we need to find ways to ensure that we're mitigating those risks, among other risks, but mitigating those risks when it comes to AI. At the same time, that's a broad question, and there's probably a lot of different kind of contexts where that would come up. And so I go back to the form over the specifics. And I think that this is where, and it really goes to the question about how we review regulations as well. If we have processes where we're really open to an inclusive and a transparent approach, you know, this doesn't always fall to governments to have to make these decisions or see all the risks. There is a wealth of activity happening like this, but in a lot of civil society conversations, a lot of multi-stakeholder conversations, work that's being done across the community to highlight the risk, to offer solutions. And really, you know, sitting in government, sometimes what we need to do is just be more opening to listening and engaging in that, and actually finding the value and helping identify the solutions. Too often, I think that like there are governmental forums who are just focused on, we need to come up with an answer to this, and it really kind of ignores the wealth of activity and the resources that are already out there. So I think, you know, at an international level, at a regional level, at a national level, at a local level, really identifying and strengthening and utilizing those consultations between governments and non-governmental stakeholders, and really welcoming that feedback and welcoming the accountability that comes with it if you're in the government. Now, that's tough to do, obviously. Sometimes the criticism is harsh, but I think it is important just to have a foundation that is a conversation that we need to have, and it's the only way to really ensure that we are mitigating the risks from all technologies, including artificial intelligence. Thanks.
Thank you, Justin. And yes, what has also come out clearly in the course of this panel is that there is an effort to engage a wide group of stakeholders in this process, so that the outcomes that come out of it are as inclusive and reflective of the priorities and imperatives of different countries and groups as possible. One final question, because we just have about 5 minutes left for the panel to conclude. There's a question about in the light of the influence of big tech companies, how do you address some of those issues arising from like one stakeholder group having quite a lot of influence in these international processes? And perhaps a related question to that is, how have you, in your respective roles, seen the quality and depth of engagement from private sector players change? Karine, we can start with you.
I mean, that's an excellent question, and that goes back to the there's some level of concentration and well, actually a high level of concentration, not just at the level of the tech companies, but also of their suppliers. So let's say along the value chain, let's say on the compute side as well, which is also critical. We're trying, governments are trying, particularly a number of governments, including the US, are trying to mitigate that concentration so that they're not so reliant on just a few players and some value chains, so there's become more resilient in essence, and companies as well. I think there are many different ways of doing that. I mean, just to take a few examples, I'm French, so I take the example of the French government giving access to its national supercomputer to this initiative, an LLM initiative called Bloom, to allow this kind of open source community of with a different ethos and operating on high, they claim higher quality vetted information to train a model that a large language model that's available to anyone in multiple languages. If you look at the US recently, we have the launch of the National AI Research Resource, and that's being I'm not sure where it's at exactly, but it's certainly, its goal is to provide allow smaller players, SMEs, everyone access. So I think it's difficult because on the one hand, there's a talent concentration that's huge within these large tech companies, and the talent concentration is undisputable, and there's, it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, for academic institutions, let alone governments, to attract this type of talent. Some academic institutions can, because they're doing, but the talent concentration is an important one. So increasing the talent pool is important. And I'm sorry, and the question was really, how can governments approach multilateral engagement and cooperation to address these concerns? Well, that's what they're doing. That's what they do all the time. So they meet, they discuss common priorities. So for example, the data protection authorities, if you're talking about data privacy, the data protection authorities will meet discuss their common priorities and try to resolve them together and find ways to do that, engaging, of course, all stakeholder groups, including the private sector. And it's the same for all areas of policies, I'd say, including on the fairness and bias considerations, competition concerns. And competition authorities are extremely engaged. They're holding hearings. They're holding hearings at the OECD in a week from now. To see, well, is there, how is this concentration? What do we do? The geopolitical implications are also critical, and that's and that's, I think, also a key reason why this initiative of the State Department with in partnership with the Atlantic Council is so important to to raise awareness and take actions and basically help support AI benefiting people broadly everywhere.
Thank you so much, Karine. Justin, Yoichi-san especially, I know it's very late in the day for you. Thank you for your thoughtful responses. Thank you for engaging with everybody in the chat. And of course, welcome to the AI Connect family, to those of you who are joining our webinar for the first time. We hope to stay engaged as we build out the program in the coming year, including through subsequent webinars that go into some of the unanswered questions in the chat as well, including specifics of how do we measure some of these standards and outcomes. With that, thank you all. Thank you for your time. We'll now be heading on to the next segment of programming